We're going to start by making the base of the bag. So go ahead and make a slip knot. And we're going to chain 13. Okay, have my chain of 13. Now the 13th chain that we made is actually going to be the turning chain. So I'm going to go back across and make some single crochet stitches, but I'm skipping this first one. So going into the second stitch for my hook, make a single crochet, and then just make one in every chain. Okay, so that completed our second row. Now we're just going to turn our work and do the same thing. So making 12 single crochets all across. Now for all of these following rows, I don't like to make that extra turning chain because it ends up creating like a bumpy edge effect. So the way I like to do it is I just go straight in to the last stitch that I made. And I usually just give myself a little bit of yarn so it's not super tight, but like that. And then make a single crochet. So just repeat the same thing. We're going across for a total of 12 stitches. So this is going to be very simple. You're just going to go ahead and make a total of 42 rows of these 12 single crochets. All right, so I made my 42 rows. You should now just have a long rectangle. Now what we're going to do is go all around this rectangle with single crochets to make a border. Now keep in mind, since we made 42 rows, this side should have 42, 12, 42, 12. So in total, you're going to have 108 stitches. So just keep that in mind while you're counting. And to start out, this is the last stitch that I made to complete this row. Start out going along this long edge. I'm going to insert my hook into this gap right here to reflect this last row that we made. That's one single crochet. I forgot to say, when you make that first stitch, make sure that you enter a marker so that you know exactly where you're ending. Now this is the second row, putting my hook right here. 2, moving on right here. 3, moving on here. 4. So just go ahead and keep following that pattern, making sure that you are making one single crochet into every row that we created on this long edge. So this I counted 41, which means we have one last stitch to make. Now, if you look closer, you're going to see that this stitch was accounting for this row, but this was the first row that we created. So I'm going to insert my hook right here, and that's going to be the last stitch to complete 42. All right, so I've made a total of 42, gone back and counted. Now we're going to go into this side of 12. So if you kind of like turn your work a little bit, you can see that when you count, this one right here is going to be your first stitch. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So make sure that you're like not skipping over the first one. It's kind of easy to miss. So as we're turning the corner, I'm going to put my first stitch into that same gap right here. So this is counting as the first one, 2, 3, 4, 5, 11, and 12 is right here. Now turning the corner, and you're going to repeat and do 42 along this side. So as I'm turning the corner, I'm again making my first stitch of this new row into the same gap. 1, 2. All right, so I counted, this is 42. Now we're ending off with this last row. Now this one, you're not going into the same gap because it's easier to just go into these last 12 stitches directly. So here's the first one. 2, 3, 4, 11, and 12 is going to be right here. All right, so go ahead and count to be sure that you have a total of 108 all along the perimeter. Now for this next row, we're going to be making front post single crochets following all along these 108 stitches. So removing the stitch marker because we're going to start a new round. Now for this new row, we're only crocheting into the front loops. So instead of going into the full V like a regular one, I'm only going into this first loop, and then a regular single crochet. Mark that as the first stitch of this row, and onto the second one right here. So only going into that front loop. 2, 3, 4. So go ahead and continue all along into every single stitch. Okay, this is what the base should be looking like at this point after I made this round. It should have started to curve upwards on these edges. All right, going into the next round, removing my stitch marker. And we're just going to proceed from now on, going into the stitches like normal. So I'm going into the full V stitch, the full V for that stitch. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you're just gonna continue making a total of 6 more rounds of regular single crochet rows in continuous rounds, and it should gradually just start moving upwards. So I've made a total of 6 rows, and I'm just going to slip stitch into the beginning of the round so I can cut and fasten off. Okay, so I just fastened off, and this is where my stitch marker is. This is where we just ended the round. So now I was going in this direction. What I'm going to do is placing my stitch marker here, I'm going to count 22 stitches to the left. So starting here where I left off, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. Place a stitch marker in the 22nd stitch right here, because this is going to mark the center of the bag where we're going to start creating our other rounds. So I place a stitch mark right here because we're going to turn our work and start from where the stitch marker is and working all around the border. So we're going to start making these rounds. This is with the stitch marker after counting 22 stitches. I'm going to turn my work around, and now this is where we're starting this new row. So I'm gonna, from the outside of the bag, not working in this way, but from the outside in. Place my hook where I just had the stitch marker. Pull some yarn through. Tie a knot to secure this. Removing the stitch marker. Now we're gonna start our round right here. So putting my hook back in, pull the yarn through, and we're gonna chain 2. 1, 2. Now we're gonna start making these clusters like this. So I chained 2. This is gonna count as my first double crochet. Yep. So I made my first double crochet. Yarn over, make your third double crochet into that same space. So you should have a cluster of 3 double crochets in this first stitch right here. Now moving this way, I'm going to skip 2 stitches, 1, 2, yarn over, and make my double crochet into this third stitch from my hook. So right into here. 1, 2, and you're going to make your other 2 in the same space so that we have another cluster of 3 doubles. 2, 3. So it's going to be looking like this essentially, and we're going to repeat the same thing all the way around. So skip 2, 1, 2, make 3 doubles into this third stitch. So you're just going to repeat the same exact thing all the way around. And since we have a total of 108 single crochet stitches all around the border, when you end and get over here, you should have a total of 36 of these clusters. At this point, I've made it to the end, and you should have 2 more stitches left, so it all aligns perfectly. So now to end this row, I'm going to slip stitch into this first chain of 2 that started the round. So I'll go right into here, slip stitch. So now I'm going to chain 2 to start this new round. And this is kind of where it gets a little bit weird. This side, you'll notice that I'm kind of on the left of this gap right here. So after this first chain of 2, I'm going to just yarn over and start my first double crochet in this gap, not right here. So I'm skipping over and starting this cluster of 3 double crochets in the next gap. So there's 1, 2, 3. And then we'll just continue with that same exact pattern that we did the first time. And what you'll see is after we end this round, we're going to start the third round slightly differently, but it all boils down to the same pattern. So I'm just making my clusters of 3 double crochets in each of these gaps. So go ahead and continue this pattern all the way around, and I'll show you how we end this round and move on to the next one. Okay, so I went all the way around, and you'll see that I just have this gap left, but this is where we made our first chain of 2. So all we're doing is making our last 2 double crochets in that gap, which will add up with that chain 2 and make our cluster of 3. So 1, 2, and this is the third one. So I'm going and I'm just slip stitching to end this round. And now it looks like this is our normal cluster of 3. So moving on to the next one, I'm chaining 2. Now for this one, you'll see I'm kind of on the right side of this gap. I'm not so much like on the left. So instead of skipping over and starting my first cluster over here, I'm going to make my first cluster into this gap. So yarn over, double crochet 2 times, and that's our first cluster. From this point on, it's pretty easy. You're gonna just keep on doing that same thing. The only thing that's changing is you're alternating the starting technique between each even and odd row. So just continue building upon those rounds, and you're gonna make a total of 15 of these rounds. So I'm on the 3rd, I have 12 more to go. Now from this point, we're gonna start working into these side straps. We've gotten up to here, and now we're gonna start doing these like branches out that are gonna connect in the middle. Where I just left off, I'm gonna count 18 clusters going in the direction where I'm crocheting. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So this is the 18th one. I'm gonna put a stitch marker right in between the 18th and the 19th. So this is essentially marking the center of the other side. So now we're splitting it right down the center so that both sides have 18 clusters. And what we're gonna do is start your next round with chain 2 like you normally would. And then I'm gonna start my cluster of 3 in this next gap. So it's gonna look the same that it has in the rows before, but we're gonna stop right in this gap right here on the other side. So I'm not going all the way around. So this is what it's gonna look like. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make one last double crochet in this gap where the stitch marker is. From here, I'm gonna chain 2, turn your work, and now I'm gonna skip past this gap right here and then start with my cluster in this next gap. So yarn over, double crochet into the next gap, make 2 more double crochets, continue all the way to the other side. Okay, I made it to the opposite side, and I'm actually going to place a stitch marker in this one where we started just so it's easier to see. So we're going to start building out this half of the strap, and each one is going to be decreasing. So it's going to be working out at this angle. So I'll show you one more time what I'm doing. I made my full cluster right here, and then in this very last gap, I'm going to make my 1 double crochet, like that, chain 2, turn my work, skip this gap, and go straight into here with my cluster of 3. You're going to build 16 of these decreasing rows. Okay, so at this point, you should have 16 rows going up. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And on the 16th one, you should have 2 full clusters, and it'll look like this. I'm going to make my chain of 2, turn my work like we have been, and instead of skipping over and going into this middle one like we were in the previous rows, what I'm going to do is I'm going to yarn over and make my first double crochet in this first gap right here. So this counts as my first double, this is my second. You should have 2 double crochets to start. Yarn over, make your normal cluster of 3 in this very center one. And then we're going to end with 2 double crochets. So 1 and 2 right here. That, chain 2, Turn your work. So this row that we just did is going to have one full cluster in the center with like 2 double crochets on the sides. The next row is going to look like this one right here, where you have 2 full clusters. So the way we're going to do that is after my chain of 2, making my first cluster in this gap right here. 1, 2, 3. Yarn over and then make your other cluster in the second gap. 1, 2, 3. And then to end the row, I'm going to do my double crochet and then kind of just put it in this space right here. So when you kind of spread these apart, it looks like this. These are just double crochets ending the rows, and then you have your full clusters right here. So now I'm going to chain 2, turn your work, and now we're going to go back to this row pattern. You're going to make a total of 14 of these alternating rows. Okay, so I made my total of 14 rows. Now I'm just going to cut and fasten this off. Okay, so now this is one finished strap. Now we're just gonna essentially turn it around and repeat the exact same thing on the other side so that we can join these together. I'm going to take my new piece of yarn, removing my stitch marker. I'm going to pull the yarn through this center gap, which is where I started. Tie a knot. Okay, holding the tail piece down, I'm going to put my hook through again and then pull this yarn around and then chain 2. So now it's going to be just the same exact thing that we did on the other side. So this is my first chain of 2 like we have right here. And I'm going to start with my first cluster in this next gap. So I'll see you back when you have your other side of this. So now we're going to go ahead and just connect them. It should look something like this. And all I'm going to do is give myself a good amount of yarn, cut, and then we're gonna sew them together. And I promise this is the only part throughout this pattern where you're gonna have to sew something. So get my darning needle. And first, before I start sewing, I'm gonna secure this end down. So just putting it through this last stitch that I made. Oops. Holding this ring so it doesn't pull through all the way and close. Pull the yarn through. And then I'm going to put my needle through this big loop that we made. And then pull it all the way. Tighten that. And now it's secured down. Now, making sure that they're not twisting or anything, I'm just connecting these two, and you're gonna line them up. And I'm gonna start with this piece that I'm gonna sew with facing me. They're gonna be slightly a different number. So this piece that I just ended has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and this side will have 8. But it's okay, it's not perfect. So what we're gonna do is a mattress stitch to end this off. So I'm gonna be lining these two right here to each other. So what I'm gonna do is from this side, this is the V stitch. I'm entering my needle into this inner loop, meeting it on the other stitch only on the inner loop. Start from the outside, going onto these next stitches. So in here, and then only getting the innermost loops. Moving on to these next ones right here. And then just continue doing that. And don't pull too hard, just like keep it loose because we're gonna tighten it all at the end. Okay, so this is what it's looking like so far. And I'm gonna secure these last stitches on here so that it completely aligns on the edge. So this one, if you kind of turn it over a little bit, it's right here. This is the inner one. Here, and then here. So now, if I go ahead and tighten this, tighten, kind of readjust, it will look something like this. So you'll see it's not like completely aligned. So on this side, we're gonna secure it down a little bit better. But that's the next step, is we're gonna create a single crochet border all along to double secure this sewed piece. So for now, I'm just going to secure this side like I normally do. Like so. So I'm going to pull a new piece of yarn through this gap right here, just so it's on the right side of the mattress stitch. So putting my hook through, pulling my yarn through, tie to secure, and leave a good amount so that you can leave in the end. Put my hook back through that loop, that gap that I just did, pull the yarn through, and then make one chain. So that's going to be our first like single crochet stitch. So I'm going to put a stitch marker right into there so that we know this is where we started. And now into this next space right here. This is where we just made the mattress stitch. I'm going to put my hook through, make a single crochet. So keep in mind that each of these clusters are double crochets. So for each of cluster length, you're going to have 2 single crochets to make up that cluster height. So the next space would be right here. One single crochet, and then another one in that same space. Like that. Moving on to this one. 1, 2. So go ahead and do this all along the border so that you're just making a nice edge of single crochets. Keeping in mind that you're just crocheting into these last double crochet stitches that are all along the edge with 2 single crochets in each one. And as we get to the very center, which is this one right here, I can see where I started. I made my 2 in this gap already. I'm going to make 1 in this center gap, and then just continue right up onto the other side. So I made 1 in the very center. I'm going to make my 2 in this first gap. And then just continue all the way up. I made it all the way onto the other side, and we're going to end off right here where I put the stitch marker. So my last 2 stitches are in this row for this row of double crochets. You'll look closely and see this is another row of doubles. This counts as my first stitch. So I'm going to put 1 more single crochet in that same gap with, where we started the round. Like this. 1. And now you have 1, 2 for this row of double crochets. And then all I'm going to do is slip stitch into this starting one. Let me take this out. Slip stitch into this starting stitch that we made. Now to get to the other side to do what we just did, instead of fastening it off and then restarting, what we're going to do is kind of flip this over, and I am going to slip stitch along this edge because this is going to be the underside anyway, so you're not going to see this. So I'm right here. I'm just going to kind of at random just slip stitch. One. I almost made it all the way across, and the last one I'm going to do is going to be kind of this stitch on the side. So I'm slightly turning it and then putting my stitch into this full V. Make my last slip stitch. And now we've made it to the other side. So I'm gonna just chain 1 from here. Okay, so I chained 1. I'm gonna kind of loosen it and then flip it around so that I'm crocheting from this side. I'm gonna go ahead and like slip my yarn through this gap. Doing the same exact thing that we did on the other side, but going this way around. So this is after my chain 1. I'm going to make my second single crochet in this row because this is a row of doubles. So I'm going to put my hook again through that same gap, make my first single crochet. And then that's going to be like where I put the stitch marker. Moving on to this next row with 2 singles. Next one. So again, it's the same exact thing from the other side, so go ahead and replay that part if you need to. I'm getting to the end right here, so I'm going to show you what that looks like. I just put my 2 single crochets for this row. This is the last row that I'm going to do. So insert my hook, make 1, 2 single crochets. Because this piece was kind of like loose, I'm going to essentially secure them together by making 1 more single crochet like right here in the middle. Kind of like play around with it. So I'm actually going to make a half double crochet because if you see, they kind of should be joining like this, so there's a little bit more height to it. I'm going to make a half double crochet, yarn over, put my hook right here in the center, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 3 loops. And then I'm just going to slip stitch into this starting one. And it should look something like this. I'm going to just cut off and fasten this off. So now this should be pretty secure at this point. So go ahead and weave in the rest of your ends. If you followed my digital pattern and you used multiple colors in this, you're going to have a lot more ends to weave in that are going to be all along the border. So just take your time and weave them in. And I would actually recommend, if you have multiple colors, that you weave all your ends in before you make this border of single crochets, because once you weave in all the ends, this will be like extra reinforcement of a clean edge. So go ahead and do that. I'm going to weave in my ends and show you guys the final product.